Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this episode of MPP. Our guest today is Nadia Davis, VP of Marketing for CaliberMind. I've known Nadia for a few years now. She was a multi-time customer of my last company, Triblio. And in my humble opinion, she's really one of the most experienced ABM practitioners around. Welcome, Nadia, to the Modern Prospecting Podcast. Tell us what you're up to at CaliberMind.
Oh, Andre, thank you so much for inviting me. Great to catch up with you again.
Yes.
You're right. I was very much in love with Triblio. There was, I think, out of all MarTech tools, that was my most favorite tool
Oh
of all
man,
times. I love
I
the
love
team
that.
behind it because I feel like in a lot of cases, it's not just software, it's a lot of times people behind it because it's a combination of the two. And I
Yes.
think the magic was very much in people. But as you mentioned, I lead marketing at CaliberMind. CaliberMind was the second tool that I felt the way I felt about Triblio, that I fell in love with
Mm,
being on the customer side.
yeah.
And the wonderful things that it allowed me to do and tell the story of how marketing moves the needle was the reason behind it, because we essentially turn marketing data chaos into clarity. We help marketers assemble all of those buyer journeys, whether it's the ABM motion that you're trying to do, whether it's you're trying to understand how your funnel is working, you're trying
Right.
to report an attribution and tell people how their investment in marketing is turning out, right? All of those questions. But I feel like it's there are so many different scenarios that marketers struggle with right now, so we could talk about
Yeah.
CaliberMind all day, but we're here to talk about modern prospecting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I am glad you gave us that overview of Caliber Mine. As you know, I was digging into and trying to get an understanding around how I guess part of it is just the idea of using data to tell a story, which I absolutely love. But one of the things that really stands out, and because you've been you're a former customer of Triblio, and thank you so much for your kind words. But one thing I've sort of like tracked your career a little bit, and one of the things that stands out about you, which a lot of people might not know, is just what I observe is the fun and that you seem to be having with your job and the creative campaigns you come up with. Like for instance, I think you've got one running right now, or a program running around. Is it? And I may be quoting it incorrectly. I mean, naming it incorrectly, but it's like I think something like Hitchhiker's Guide to Analytics or something like that. Is
Yep.
where?
Hitchhiker's Guide to Marketing Analytics.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of curious, actually, where do you get inspiration? You're really creative. You seem like you're having a fun time with your job, and so where do you get inspiration for these creative programs? Where and is there a process to that ideation, or is it sort of like serendipity? On a Sunday afternoon, idea hits you and you just go and implement it. What does that look like?
It's interesting that you're asking that. Literally, when we presented at a marketing analytics summit, CaliberMind did, we kind of presented this dilemma in marketing where you have the marketing department is very dynamic, in my opinion. Like out of all business functions, it's the most
Mm,
dynamic function because you have the largest spectrum from people that are extremely creative. That's your graphic design people, your communications, your writers, right? And then you're going to go through that spectrum. You pass through campaigns, you pass through demand gen, and then you veer into marketing operations and marketing data
right.
science, and marketing analytics, and you're going to get more STEM minded people, and they all live within the same house, so you have all sorts of children living within the same house, right? And to me, I feel like in a lot of cases, like in my brain, the split is right there, right down the middle line. So I have my
Wow.
creative side. I wouldn't be your most amazing graphic designer, but I know enough to be dangerous. I do recognize talent though, so that's another thing. But I am an avid reader. Like I read
Mm,
anything. I like stuff on paper though. So like ebooks, I'm a little bit challenged with that. Some may hate me because I print stuff out. I like reading things. I write on the margins of every single book, so I would not be
yeah.
able to pass down books. I read business books. When somebody writes a book, I'm curious, what they had in their mind. But Hitchhiker's Guide to Marketing Analytics, for example, this was totally. I read the book. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I got inspired.
Right.
It was the world phenomenon, right?
Of
I'm like,
course.
oh my gosh, this is totally like marketing. Look at all the stuff that we got going on, right? And then, in parallel to that, within the marketing, the Hitchhiker's Guide to Marketing Analytics, we have these amazing speakers. people that are just so
Mm,
knowledgeable. They're in my network, Sanger and Vajra, Scott Brinker. Like, I was shocked when they said yes to me. When I said, "Can you like share your experience?" I said, "Yeah, no problem." And I
mhm,
kept thinking about just the whole concept of like getting a yes, right? And in one weekend, my son plays travel baseball. Both my son and my husband are obsessed with baseball. And
mm.
the Hall of Fame, that script song is my son's walkout song
I
on,
see.
to the bat, to the plate. So we were driving to his practice, and I'm like, I got a Hall of Fame here on Hitchhiker's Guide. We should absolutely do a promo. So I recorded, Hall of Fame theme song on piano, got sheet music and everything, and that became kind of the theme around it. So I would say inspiration does find me, but I do
Yeah.
a lot to feed it.
Yeah, and sounds like reading and, there's a lot of, like, just your not just business books, but novels and all there's a lot of crossover, right? Yeah.
I'm trying to get through War and Peace right now.
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. You are an avid reader. Yeah, and I said earlier, I think of you. You're really one of the most experienced ABM practitioners around today. I think there are certainly a lot of people that talk about it, pontificate about it, but you're actually a practitioner. And in fact, with Modern Prospecting Podcast, one of the things we want to do is talk to practitioners, right? And so about how to prospect, how to build pipeline, and a lot of that is on the sales side, but also on the marketing side. And so you are, as you said, a multi-time Trublio customer. Thank you. But I just to take a step back, I would love your take on the state of ABM today, because it feels, and I'm not in it now the way I was before, but feels like it's lost a little bit of momentum. Maybe I'm incorrect, and feel free to correct me. Is ABM still thriving today? And or has it changed? Has it evolved? What's your take on it?
Scott Brinker puts out this report once a year, the state of marketing operations. Or I can't remember whether it was that one or the state of your stack, which is also another report that they put out.
Mm,
So when they, and it's a 140-page report, right? I think it's the state of marketing of Martech. That's what it is, the state of Martech. It's a robust report. A lot of research goes into that. They look at different categories within Martech and show you which ones are still kind of growing, which ones are plateauing, which ones are
yeah,
dropping steam. And last year, ABM was that one category that lost the most in terms of its market share as a category. I think 10%. It dropped down by 10%, right? So data, of course, is one of those that grew exponentially. Well, who knew? We got more tools that generate more
yeah, yeah.
data, right? And I think in a lot of cases, it's because the assumption was made that tools constitute the go-to-market motion. If you have the ABM tools, which
Mm,
a few players, of course, became dominant in the space, as long as you have those tools, you have the account-based motion in place. When in
mm,
reality, the tools are only as good as your execution of the motion itself, and
mhm,
people make the motion, which is processes, which is alignment. And all these I know have become like cheesy terms. But
mm,
ultimately, what that means, like if your boots on the ground, your sales team, your AEs wouldn't know what to do next with what
yeah,
marketing brought in, that's where it fizzles out. And I think some companies, especially bigger ones, and I literally heard from a practitioner today where they gave me the whole story how they tried and it didn't work because they go
mm,
after really big accounts. They go after Visas and MasterCards of the world, right? Global companies. And they would say, well, we're targeting these top accounts and we're seeing, stuff happening. But then it doesn't go anywhere because salespeople want names, or maybe because there's 400 titles of the right
yeah,
personas with these accounts and we don't know who that is. So it's almost like, the idea was there, but the execution fell short, or the aspirations were to scale it, or somebody may challenge this concept of scaling ABM and they could say, you can only scale it when you have more people, because ultimately it is a one-to-one in a lot of cases. What closes the deal is that one-to-one motion, which is
mm,
really not new. Everybody had their top 20 accounts. Everybody had, those white space, territory centric accounts, even before the whole technology was front and center.
exactly.
And people would try to break into them, go take reps out to dinner,
Yeah,
have conversations, shake hands at events. And somehow all that got overshadowed by the idea that if only we put more dollars behind a platform, we're going to get there. And
yeah.
everybody had the same idea at the same time.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, obviously, when I was completely neck deep in ABM with Triblio, I used to say this like the last mile in ABM is really account-based selling. It's like you can run your account-based advertising, you can personalize your website, all the stuff that you could do with Truly. But even when we were doing that, I used to say and think, just the last mile is the selling piece. Who do you sell to? Like the sales team wants to know exactly who should I contact, and actually, how do I go about prospecting to that account? How can I convert their interest into actually a qualified meeting, right? Or into qualified pipeline opportunity. And believe it or not, that's actually part of the inspiration for us starting Tiga, is that I just felt like it's the other side of the coin that we never solved with Turblio, which is how do we equip the sales team? And obviously, with the power of AI, being able to scale those conversations and those interactions. But I think it's really interesting to get your point of view on the state of ABM, because that was how I felt as an observer outside, that it was losing some momentum. Do you also think that perhaps what contributed to this is just the cost of the technology platforms? It seemed like you need to spend well over $100,000 to even get ABM to work as a platform. Never mind the human resource to manage that and that kind of thing. Did the cost play into that as well, or?
Yeah, that's just your subscription, then you get your media spent. I mean, that's part of it.
Yeah, that's
But I
true.
think in a lot of cases, like, oh, data is a huge piece that's a problem for many companies. The bigger the
Mhm.
company, the bigger the problem presents itself, right? From legacy, from multiple sources, from many things that are happening that are hard to capture. I feel like in a lot of cases, the assumption was you just get that one thing and you're golden. It takes care of everything. When in reality, it doesn't. You don't stop doing all of the other things through all of the other channels.
Yeah.
There is this notion that the dark funnel consumes so much that you might as well just give up even trying to shine the light at into that dark funnel. It's just what it is. You got to solve it elsewhere. When in
Mhm.
reality, it created this a lazy habit of people not collecting the data that they do have, the data that maybe sometimes is already collected. It just needs to be brought together to kind of directionally understand what's happening over here and make a decision that allows you to take the next step. Everybody's like stuck at this top of funnel. Okay, so something is happening, this account is engaging, and then what? And then you're running a bunch of people activities, you're running campaigns, you're running emails, but none of that flows into the same single view of that buyer journey. And the excuse is, well, it's dark funnel, can do nothing about it. And that's where it fizzles out, right? Because the sales team has nothing to kind of go off of. The marketing team does not have a whole lot to report off of because they're doing things that are seemingly are disconnected because the data doesn't connect. So to me, the huge aha moment when I became a client of CaliberMind, even before I was a head of marketing at CaliberMind, was that ability to bring all of that account related data into one view, because then you can get your BDRs on board and say, hey,
Yeah.
let me show you. Look at this account. This person did something. This person did something. Not necessarily the clicks that got de-identified. You probably don't even know, but those people have been, to a bunch of your webinars. They probably downloaded your content from before, and you have them in your Salesforce somewhere. There was some email activity, and the BDRs would look at it, and because they're hungry, because they're ready to go and make extra calls, like, I love this. I'm going to go and call, and then they would
Mm.
have successes. And then they take that success and they go to their AE and say, hey, I saw it in this tool and I called on this account. And guess what? I got a conversation. There is a meeting. Now, out of a sudden, the whole framework changes and the AEs are like, wow, this stuff that we're getting is for real because the BDR tried it, it worked. I tried it, it worked. So to me, it was always like this bottom up ABM motion where you have to convince people that it's real by giving them all
Mm.
the data in that single view of the account, right? As opposed to this top down where the marketing leader brings a big ABM platform and now the business is, the GTM motion has changed and everybody has to buy into GTM and everybody gets educated on how the funnel is built and what the stages mean. Like they don't really need that. They just need to know that once all of this homework is done, here's your buyer's journey, and then you look at five and you make a choice which one looks like most plausible. I think that's what makes the difference, the
Yeah.
instrumentation and the operation piece.
Well, it does feel, I think, for most people that it's more difficult than ever to prospect, to build qualified pipeline. At least in talking to a lot of sales folks that we talk to, it there's a sense it's more difficult than ever before to actually prospect and build qualified pipeline. Would you agree with that? And if so, why do you think it is? Like what has changed, for instance, between building pipeline and building prospecting 10 years ago versus what we experience today?
You think marketers are different from average humans in our ingenuity and our creativity and our ability to come up with like this cool stuff, but at the end of the day we're creatures of habit. So if we know, think about the lead sources in Salesforce even, right? Like if we know we have these 6 channels that are our lead gen channels, we will continue pushing more stuff through those 6, 7, 8, however many channels, right? But does gated content work anymore? No, because there's been so much of it. People are disillusioned, but also because I haven't even seen what's behind the gate. And you ask me to give you my stuff when I haven't even seen if I like it or not, if it's worth it or not, right? Then you have the whole, third party content syndication motion. You have the whole buy the list, do things off of that list. I think it's just the tactics have been so overused across
Hmm.
all of the channels. It's like everybody's
Saturation.
exactly. Everybody's pounding the same list of accounts, and you can only do so much in your inbox.
So then, like, what's the answer? I mean, like, I guess, here on this podcast, I always say, I'd love for the listeners to leave with one or two things they can apply. Yes, the channels are saturated. What's the answer to that in today's world? Like, what is it? Intent data? Is it, as we like to talk about it on our side, just the idea of um, you know custom buying signals that matter to your business? What is the answer to sort of, how should, maybe I'll ask it this way, how should we prospect differently today versus what we did 10 years ago? Maybe contrast, if in fact doing the same thing just ends up, you know oversaturating the same channels, and we can't get attention, then what should we be doing differently?
I'll be like a lawyer and I'll say the famous phrase, it depends, right? Because every business is different. But
Hmm.
I think for every business, regardless of what is a specific industry or sub industry they're in, there are certain specific nuanced niched channels where they know their users are present. Like if
Mm.
that's your watering hole and you can truly, harvest that channel and you can farm that channel before you actually harvest it, like that could be one of those guaranteed things that's running while you're trying something else. For example, in
Yeah.
my previous role, I was marketing to government officials because we were selling technology to government officials. And the industry was different in in a content consumption patterns, where for everybody else webinars were nothing new. There was a lot of them out there. Like
Mm.
in marketing, everybody's got a webinar or two or five. It's hard to kind of get people to show up. In this world, webinars were something new. Not because nobody had ever heard about them, but because none of the competitors invested enough resources to run them. So that
Yeah.
was something that, an oldie but a goodie. I could
Yeah.
imagine that other industries were, I mean, I was in the IT industry at one point in time, marketing to developers. Now that's a hard group. Developers are very unique
Yes.
individuals. We're trying to get to engage them. Forget about filling out forms. Just trying to get to engage them was a hard thing, right? At that time, Stack Overflow was the thing. If you
Yeah.
figure out the right community, so you just got to be really, really selective and
That,
choosy.
yeah, that's a really good point. One of the things you're saying there, if I can broaden that as a concept, is that, first of all, you've got to be able to reach your community either in the channel that they use or in the or in the venue that they gather, right? Like that's essentially what you just said. It may be Discord, today for developers, or it may be, and I think that is quite resonant with what we see. What we on our side, I think, in having dealt with a lot of companies also, what we would also say is that yes, you have to find the right channels. they're actually really what I think, if I can broaden the concept of what you're just talking about, is there are particular plays, using particular channels, discovering particular signals that are really particular to your business or your segment of the market. You've got to do the hard work to figure out what that is. And I don't think that's going to be handed to you on a silver platter. Like, that is the work of great go-to-market leaders, is to figure that out. And in just having seen and talked to a lot of go-to-market leaders in customer base and outside. Thoughts on that?
I mean, you would not solve it with vibe marketing, I can tell you that. That's the one thing you would not solve with vibe marketing. There's a little
Yeah.
bit more insight and kind of, thought process that has to go into it. But you said also something interesting about intent data and, this
Yes.
whole golden age of intent data that we have gone through. And now I feel like it's more at the sunset stage. I think,
Yeah.
again, the assumption was that single channel play, intent being that channel, if we want to kind of imagine that as being it. But at the end of the day, like, all of this data, when it's taken at a channel level, right, it's so directional. There are so many assumptions that we could make of what does this mean. I mean, marketing does deal with a lot of data, right? And if you just take silos of data, the lily pads of, source that it's coming from, you will never get the full picture. But I think the power is, like, if we're talking about, slicing and dicing data and getting more insights out of it, when you start layering those signals, whether you call them signals or whatever, you start layering those signals, you apply first party data, you kind of look at your intent, which is, to me, intent is more like, okay, that's just a confirmation that what I'm seeing,
Mm.
what else I'm seeing there is truly, like, at a broader scale. But it's never that one, because there's intent, it's 100%
Yeah.
guaranteed there's something there, pull that account into your list. It's never that. But stacking signals and being able to apply all of those findings and show them within one picture, like, that's back to marketing operations. Like, this is where things start and stop. The concepts are great, everybody's got ideas. Execution wise, if you don't have a very strong ops teams that knows their way
Right.
around your stack and your data, like, you're already behind.
Yeah. Yeah. There is, I think, in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years, especially, there's been increasing skepticism around intent data, and these are all products that we're familiar with. Products like Bombora and Sixth Sense as an intended, but as a category, not naming any particular vendor, but just as a category, my perception is also, like, B2B go-to-market teams are becoming skeptical about intent data. Why do you think that is? Like, what you mentioned something, it's directional, and I would agree, but elaborate on your thoughts on why do you think there's some skepticism around intent data?
So when I started, and again, there are many sources, but I specifically remember Bombora had 7,000 different categories that you could pick from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think today it's 15,000. So
Mm.
it just keeps growing, right? But then, regardless of whether it's Bombora, whether it's IDG, whoever that is, or Six Sense, like, these categories, you're thinking that you're picking something that is very tailored to you. Because look, you're picking one out of 15,000. Surely it has to be, exactly what you're looking for. But each one of those is so, so, so broad. And it's also a little bit of that black box feel where you don't really know why was something pulled into this category. What is it
Yeah.
that triggered that? Is it because somebody was interested? Did they get a new intern that was, researching something? Was it like the buying signal? And there's no way to segment it further unless you're within, like, specific tool, and then you start layering all these additional things. But even when you do layer them, you don't know if that intent can then be kind of tailored to that specific persona, or that segmentation will actually apply along the lines of title and, company size,
Yeah.
all those other filters that you layer on. So it becomes very murky. Like, I had someone mentioned the definition of, like, this data lake, kind of, the haha definition of a data lake, saying that it's shallow, murky, and dirty. Like, yeah, in a
Yeah.
lot of cases, that's what data is. You just don't know. And take that and carry it to the next stage is something that you're basing your next phase of build on. It's like really hard to do if you're a skeptical marketing professional, which in operations and demand gen, a lot of us have become skeptical because everybody's got a silver bullet. I'm yet to
Yeah.
see one.
No, of course. And I think, you touched on something. I think that's always, even when I was doing ABM, I always think of intent data as the other side of the ABM coin. On one side you have the platform like Triblio, but then intent data is a big part of it. But I always felt that the challenge is what you said. It's opaque. You kind of have to take the vendor's word, like, hey, this is a keyword that this thing triggered on, and there's no way to audit it. There's no way to get more information about the person that actually might have visited on. So there's this kind of black box, as you said. I think the other thing you said that's really very true is also on the user side. They may have been oversold on the concept of intent data, right? I usually like to say to people, the reality is the best you can say about intent data is that it's really only interest data, and in particular just topical interest, right? When the tools like Bombora and some of the other providers out there, it's a very particular kind of intent signal, which is, it's keyword based. It's based on this idea that I've read an article or I've seen a piece of content, and these are the highly associated keywords with that piece of content, typically like in a title or something. That's basically how it works, right? But that's just interest data. What we found interesting, and actually what led us to start Tiga, was that we noticed that when teams actually prospect, on top of that, they look for these very particular buying signals that might matter to their business. Like for instance, someone might say, "Hey, I've got a list of target accounts. I want to know how many of them got a bad Glassdoor review in the last 90 days." Right? Because I want to prospect to them because I sell employee engagement software, right? Something like that. It's not just topical interest. It's very it's driven by a lot of it, to be honest, a lot of manual action that people conduct to sort of unearth this microsegment that they want to target. And so I think intent data does fall short because of the opaqueness, because of just just the method that is employed, right? So
No, I think it would be a very interesting and probably very powerful kind of growth path for ZoomInfo, Bombora, or anybody who's in the intent data space to add this granularity that you're talking about. So everybody sells plain vanilla ice cream. The first person who can figure out how to add a flavor to it and then allow people to customize their sundae, I think that would be powerful because then every business can apply their use case. To your point, what matters to you? Reviews? Here you go, use that. But it would be a hard thing to do unless it's a small, nimble player like yourself.
yeah, I mean that's our promise, and or at least that's the mission. We believe that every business, there's the general common signals. Some of them are topical interest signals, like the ones you get it with these intent tools. But we're helping you find the signals that matter to your business, right? And that's really, and some of them are very custom, as I was just talking about. But as we leave this topic, I think one big takeaway I want to say, which you pointed out, is related to intent data. I think is absolutely correct, and it's actually on the user side. When I say they've been oversold, they I think very often consumers of intent data view it as deterministic, and instead of directional. The phrase you use, it's directional, right? It's an indicator. It doesn't mean that that person will buy. That doesn't mean it's directional. So I think that is certainly sort of I think it's a good takeaway when you think about using intent data or even buying signals.
I would agree.
Yeah. Well, everyone is thinking and talking, and some are using AI today. Just want to ask you: have you experimented with AI? Are you using AI in your go-to-market programs? Just curious about, you're usually an adopter of technology, and love, not say you love the shiny new thing, but in a very constructive way, you like leveraging technology for advantage in the market. So, are you using AI?
Well, a huge part of what CaliberMind does, we have AI functionality within
Mm,
the tool, but I think you got to apply a little bit of skepticism in terms of applicability to that everyday, repeatable, guaranteed, always
mm,
delivers type of way of using AI. I think everybody figured out their growth hack, their marketing content creation hack, but it's all like very, um, one off.
yeah.
It's not scalable. So, you know, within CaliberMind, we allow people to pull insights from the data and ask questions to their data in a
Mm,
way that delivers, very consistent results. Where if you want to understand, back to the ABM topic, who is your buying group within this account, you can ask AI, you can ask Cal to look at everybody within the account who engaged and get that summary. So wouldn't that be nice for the sales team? Say, ask Cal,
yeah.
and you get delivered a list of people from the last 6 months in the campaigns that they participated in, so they can
Yeah.
do outreach, right? But the flip side of that is like this echo chamber on LinkedIn that I think a lot of people are part of, where the notion is that it's the age of a two-person company with 30 AI agents all doing wonderful things.
Yes. What do you think of that? Yeah, there's yeah, that's a very popular narrative in like the age of AI. In 5, 10 years, you're going to have, what do they say, like $100 million company that's run by 5 people or something like that. What are your thoughts on that?
I could imagine that there is an exception to every rule, and maybe somebody will figure out that one specific use case, whether it's going to be very premeditated or it's going to be the blind squirrel finding a nut out of a sudden and then popularizing it, saying, "Look, it worked for me, it will work for you." But literally 2 days ago, I left a cell phone provider because when I kept experiencing a very specific service issue over and over and over again, I mean, we're talking 3 months and multiple calls. I
Yeah,
finally called to resolve it, and I was so determined to tell him that unless you resolve it right now, I'm moving to a different cell phone provider because it became very annoying. I call and I get, "Hello, this is AI voice here to assist you." And I'm literally going, "Operator, operator, operator," and nothing. Finally, I decided to go through the prompts. I'm like, "Okay, I'll play the game." And I said, "This is my issue." So, and the answer that I got, "Go to documentation page so that you can find steps to resolve your problem." And that
yeah,
was the last drop in the bucket, honestly, when the patience ran out. So I called back, I found a person, and I moved companies. And I think
yeah,
that's kind of the expectation that all of us have to be mindful of, because ultimately, in some cases, people do try to find an automated self-serve way out of a situation. And there are certain use cases where that's very welcome, where it's a repetitive process, it's well guarded, the results are guaranteed. But so many people are trying to force this square peg into a round hole and say it will apply over here because hypothetically, conceptually, the functionality is there, and it's just not. So you still
yeah.
have to think about people.
I think the idea that you'll deploy just an army of AI agents that will, hey, prospect to humans directly, or customer service handle all these. I think it works if it's transactional. In other words, on the human side, there's an expectation that I'm asking a question and really I just want an answer back. I'm not interested in a conversation. I don't actually have follow-up questions. It's one question, give me the answer so that I can get on with my day. And if you can have the AI actually produce a good answer, then that's fine, because the expectation on the human side is. But if it goes beyond that, so in other words, like in prospecting, or in if to have an AI prospect to a human, there's a asymmetry there that doesn't sit well with the human. Meaning, you're asking me for my time, you're asking me for my attention, but you don't actually have applied no human effort to it. It's just a AI bot. That doesn't work really well. The asymmetry, just as a human, that it doesn't work well now. Now, if you're talking to my AI, who is going to qualify, whether or not I'll even take the meeting, that's a different thing, right? But when you have AI agents, sort of in a non-transactional but sort of more relational way try to engage the human buyer or the human customer, I think that's a problem. It's I don't think we've proven that as humans we want to interact that way. So
And when you think about it, the way we train AI, we train it on rules. So things where patterns exist, think code, think language, right? There are certain patterns. It does fantastic. But there's so many processes where more exceptions exist to the rules. There are some rules, but there are more exceptions. That's why it really falls short. Like what blew my mind was that when our the CaliberMind product team was telling us how AI gets trained and how many tries have to be put in place for it to really pass the stress test for that predictable guaranteed
yeah,
result delivery. It blew my mind because it's not just the same thing 10 times like your typical QA process, right? You're testing a stove, turn it on 10 times. If it works, then it passed.
yeah,
If it didn't, then it goes elsewhere. It's changing how you ask the question to really stress test it to understand
yeah,
if it will pick up the nuances. So I think this concept of how standard is your process and how many rules do you have in place that will always be true is like a good rule of thumb to apply. But in a lot of cases, especially with human processes and
yeah.
qualification, like you have to look for nuance.
Yeah. Now, I take it from some of your answers that outside of CaliberMind, you're not a big user of AI tools. Would you say that? Like you haven't really outside of CaliberMind, what you use, you're not a big user of AI tools in the GTM motion, whether creating content or other functions. Is that correct? And if so, that's fine. I'm curious why on your side, what as a GTM leader, what is um, what's your concern, or where's the gap that compels you, that hasn't yet compelled you to use it?
No, I mean, I use it a lot, honestly, whether it's
I
in my
see.
personal life or in general kind of marketing world. I'm redoing my kitchen. I had Gemini mock up the new layout of countertops. It couldn't quite figure out the corners, but we got pretty close. But I do like using it because in marketing you're always time poor. We just always are. We
Yes.
never have enough resources. We never have enough budget. So whatever helps us close that gap is amazing. But I think
Yes.
my skepticism that you're picking up on is the fact that so much bad content got produced where it's copy and paste. Well,
Mm.
yesterday's no writers became writers overnight, but because they were not writers in the past, they cannot even evaluate the output that they got. So they go and plaster it all over the place. And out of a sudden, my LinkedIn feed,
Yeah.
became
Yeah.
the kind of clones of Chat GPT with the same
Yeah.
syntax, with the same sentence and copy structure. It just becomes really, really old and boring real quick. And that's where this kind of skepticism comes from. But
Yeah.
they're like ideation, fantastic. Talking back and forth, checking things. Again, a lot of it is directional. Everybody swears by their custom GPTs, and they're great. But we all know that Chat is a pleaser. Gemini has its own qualities. Claude is the preppy, buttoned up one. So once you start applying those heuristics,
Yes.
you realize that simple answer that comes back, oh, for your SEO check, do this, this, and that. You still have to apply that lens of, is it everything or should I think outside of the box? I think
Yeah.
this notion of being put in the box to me is the most unnatural thing. Just
Yeah.
trust but not verify.
Well, I will say this. I think that something you said, which is, and I am picking up from a positive standpoint, is that the biggest benefit to using AI in GTM and is really so far less about, hey, my conversion rates have doubled, and more about, I can do more, I can research more, I can ideate better. It's more about productivity than it is about conversion optimization, say, or that kind of thing. That's where I sense is where the state of the AI applicability is today. But hey, I want to wrap up. I always try to wrap up with a couple of like more personal things. Just a couple of questions. Uh, two things, but I'll start with the first one. Um, there are if there's a younger go-to-market leader, either on the sales side, marketing side, that is looking for career advice, what is the number one career advice that you've learned over the years, like in your own life? What have you what have you learned that you think, this is something that's anchored you in your career development?
I think it comes down like specifically within marketing, and I will keep it within marketing to kind of make
Okay.
it more applicable. I think um, data tells stories, and if you want to have weight to the story that you're telling to the business, you have to anchor it in data. Otherwise,
Mm,
anecdotal stuff is the very same thing that people lament about, that disqualifies them from the seat at the table, the proverbial seat at the table. So the sooner you embrace it, the sooner you start paying attention to it, the more exponential your career growth can become.
mm,
And just stop fighting it, just get good, learn it, embrace the tools. There's only going to be more, right?
yeah.
That's one thing. And the other thing, like, it's hard for me to imagine anyone in the marketing role who just does it for a paycheck as opposed
Mhm.
to truly enjoy it, because
Loving
it
it,
can be
yes.
as much fun as you put into it. So it is what you make it. And if you don't like where you are, there's the world of opportunities where it can be fun.
Yes.
It can produce for the business and for you, and for you to be satisfied at the
Yes.
end of the day. So I think
Yes.
you got to look for that.
Yeah, I think that's so good advice. It's when you're starting out, sometimes you can be really feeling like um, you gotta make the job work, but find a job that fits you. I think, right? Like, and the thing about having fun and really, as I said in the start of this podcast, I see that in your work. You seem to have fun, you seem to enjoy it, even when you interact on LinkedIn and that kind of thing. Um, okay, I know you're super busy as a professional. You're married, you have two kids. I think you said earlier, was it? Um, you
Yes.
know, and so work-life balance, we sometimes never want to talk about it. There's a lot of on one hand, some years ago there was a lot of emphasis around what some people have since called hustle culture, and then there's been some blowback. How do you maintain work-life balance? What are some of the things you do to maintain work-life balance, have a happy marriage, have a happy family life? If you don't mind me asking it.
No, 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 no. That's fair. I think it's different for everyone. But the best thing that my parents did for me when I was little, and I didn't think about it at that time this way, but they put me through musical conservatory, which was a
Mm,
program in addition to regular grade school where you go 6 days a week and you have full schedule. And what it does to you, even though it's not fun when you're a kid, that's extra stuff that you got to do. It's extra homework, it's practice and everything, but it makes you a very organized, very schedule driven person. I've heard the same people who played sports, they learn to manage their time. So,
mm,
this Parkinson's concept of the task will take as long as you give it, in my world applies very much. I budget
yeah,
my day, I budget my every day, I budget my weekends. I mean, if I do not get up at 5, but get up at 6, I feel like the world already moved on without me. So I
yeah,
think for me, just budgeting that schedule, making sure I do not go beyond the boundaries of what I allocated for a task, allows me to get through so many things and make sure the attention is given to everyone. All the places where others need to be, we are there. All the
yeah,
things that need to happen for work within the allotted time happen for work. It requires you to move at a higher speed. I mean, you're not even like in the fast lane on a highway. This is like German Autobahn, right? You're in a BMW going 100 miles an hour, but that's what it takes if you want to get places. So to me, I embrace this lifestyle. I like this lifestyle. I have time for hobbies. I have time for family, but it requires very,
discipline.
just
Yeah,
very disciplined way about your calendar. Yeah.
and I still can't get over the fact that you just said you wake up at 5. So,
There's a book that's called The 5 a.m. Club. I learned about it
uh, I
recently.
I will not be a member of that club, I suspect. But anyway, well, Nadia, thank you for being on the podcast. I loved the conversation, enjoyed it, and always good to see you. And thank you for sharing your wisdom, your thoughts on ABM, on intent data, on life, work-life balance. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun.